Welcome to the Evolution of Management Thought Lecture. You're not required to watch this video, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to absorb the information in the course other than the PowerPoint slides and the notes pages that you'll find in Moodle. This lecture is a survey of different management theories which evolved since the Industrial Revolution. We'll go in chronological order, starting with the scientific management theory in the late 1800s through organizational environment theory, which began in the 1950s. Now, you see this chart here with scientific management theory beginning in the 1890s, around that Industrial Revolution period in America, followed quickly by administrative management theory. We don't see behavioral management theory come about until about 1915, and that lasts until right around World War II with management science theory, and then in the 1950s with organizational environment theory. The concept of management is an invention of man. As we transitioned from a society of farmers to an industrial society, it became apparent that the way people interacted to accomplish tasks had distinct patterns. Theories of management, starting with the scientific management theory, were crafted to explain these interactions. Management books tend to focus on the function of management inside of organizations, yet few accept that there is a social function. It's precisely because management has become so pervasive as a social function that it faces its most serious challenge. Management's about human beings. Its task is to make people capable of joint performance, to make their strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. This is what organization is all about. Every enterprise is composed of people in different skills and knowledge doing many different kinds of work, and it must be built on communication and individual responsibility. Now let's look deeper into each of these theories, beginning with the scientific management theory. This theory, developed by Frederick Winslow Taylor, is one of the first of the industrial era. This theory was an approach of simplifying tasks and work to make things more efficient and therefore more productive. By studying the techniques and tools a worker used, Taylor would determine the best way to do a task. The four principles or steps of scientific management theory are: first, to study the way workers perform their task, gather all the informal job knowledge that workers possess, and experiment with ways to improve how the tasks are performed, like a time and motion study. This really helps in determining that one best way. So then you take the second step, which is to codify the new methods of performing a task into written rules and standard operating procedures. Then the third step is you carefully select workers who possess skills and abilities that match the needs of the task and train them to perform the task according to those rules and procedures you did in step 2. Step 4 is to establish a fair and acceptable level of performance for a task, and then develop a pay system that provides a reward for performance above the acceptable level. Now, workers could and did purposefully underperform. This was common in environments where labor unions existed, and workers were encouraged to meet the minimum standard and no more. This is because the union felt that exceeding the standard could make other workers look bad or encourage management to raise the standard. Now, what management ended up doing, though, was responding with using more machines and automation in their process. This was really the beginning of assembly line thought. In his book, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith spoke of a straight pin factory. In pin making, a single person completing all the steps could scarcely make a pin a day, let alone 20. This was called the craft style of making pins. But within division of labor into a series of 18 production steps, a work group could make upwards of 48,000 pins a day. In the specific case, the factory was able to increase production by a factor of 200. Now, the division of labor is more prevalent in highly industrial countries, especially in manufacturing. Its advantage is that it increases the dexterity of every workman, saves time, and uses human labor, facilitating the machinery. The improvement of dexterity increases the quantity of work a person can perform by reducing work to a single operation that they can quickly master. Now, through this division of labor, workers can produce large quantities of goods, more than if they produced the entire good themselves, the fruits of which they could use to buy goods from other specialized people to increase the betterment of the entire society. Now, large numbers of unskilled pre-industrial people had to be made productive in a short time. Scientific management was used to implement the systematic training rather, and application of blue-collar workers on a large scale. The assembly line was a short-term compromise. Even though the assembly line was highly efficient, Its inflexibility and poor use of human resources could often lead to ineffectiveness. Now, this really became a widely accepted theory during World War One because of the huge increase in demand for ammunition, weapons, and vehicles for the war effort. Now, when creating these specialized jobs under scientific management theory, managers would follow these four steps. If done according to Taylor's beliefs, they would conduct a large amount of observations and test out different ways to optimize the sub processes. Then they would train the individuals to master one sub process so that they could get just that perfectly right. And then they'd arrange these sub processes to fit together to form the product that they wanted. Now, we're going to move on to administrative management theory in this slide and the next few ones. And this really went from where scientific management looks at individual workers and tasks. Management, administrative management theory looks at how to make an entire organization more effective. It really calls for formalized structures with clear division of labor within that organization. Now, there are 14 principles derived from this theory, and we're going to explore them. All management theories have common characteristics or principles, just applied in a different way. We're going to focus on the 14 principles brought about by administrative management theory as described by Henri Fayol. Those shown on this slide really address organizational and directional principles. When you read these definitions, they may make you think they're cold and discipline-oriented, but that's not necessarily the case. Order, as you see defined here, is mission-oriented, but you can and should accommodate for employees' needs like the work environment, teleworking options, or ergonomically oriented machinery. Remember, as a manager, your organization can't accomplish its goals without its team members. Now, the division of labor is exactly what it sounds like, dividing those tasks, as we said before, to certain individuals or teams to accomplish tasks effectively and efficiently as well. Now, authority is critical, and you must give it to whomever you give responsibility. Now, this authority and the responsibility also comes along the responsibility for safety, health, and welfare of your employees. Just because you have authority over them doesn't mean you can ignore your team's welfare. I mean, it's really just the opposite. You're really charged with doing that in all aspects of their life, their work, as well as their health and welfare outside of work. Now, subordination, when we talk about taking care of your employees, you can't allow your people's interest to be more important than that of the company. You ensure their health and welfare in service to the company because without them, they couldn't achieve their goals, meaning the company couldn't achieve its goals. Now, as we continue with these principles, this slide really covers those associated with command. Unity of direction allows for focused effort. If different managers are approaching the same project or business activity, they may be working off different plans that weren't coordinated or deconflicted. One manager with one plan allows for the team to move together towards a goal. Now, in a related concept to unity of direction is unity of command. It ensures the team members receive orders only from one manager. If you report to more than one manager, there's a significant risk of confusion. I mean, different managers may give conflicting orders based on a lack of communication between them, or because they have varying and possibly opposing agendas. Now, the scalar chain ensures a solid line of authority from the top of an organization down to the bottom. This is important in the event a manager in the chain is in a meeting, on vacation, or can't be contacted. You can't just let all work stop when you can't communicate with that next manager. You can move forward and either up or down the line to contact the next manager to take or provide guidance as appropriate. Now, discipline. In this case, it doesn't mean to punish people. It means that employees align their actions to the rules of the organization. It's probably the role that most people associate with managers is the discipline to follow the rules and ensure team members actively know the rules in order to effectively follow them. Now, this last slide with these 6 principles of management, they cover ones related to employee interaction. I mean, equity is a noble principle and should be the goal of any manager. You want your team to work well and be disciplined in their work. One way to help this is to treat your employees fairly. This doesn't always mean treating them the exact same, but in a way that aligns with the organization's values and all the applicable laws and regulations. Now, centralization is about how an organization pushes down authority to make decisions. A centralized approach is where the highest level of an organization makes all the decisions. A decentralized approach will allow lower level units to make decisions on their own. The determination of how centralized an organization is will depend on several factors, such as geography, how fast decisions have to be made. If you are using a centralized decision making process, it takes longer for those decisions to be made. You'll also need to look at the level of trust in an organization. The more trust there is, the more decentralized it tends to be. It takes a lot of trust by senior leaders to let their lower level managers make these decisions because they feel that they're properly trained, competent, and that those low level managers are aligned with the company values. Now, initiative is how much an individual team member is allowed to start and carry out an action without prior approval by their leadership. This is another thing we talk about with centralization and the trust between managers. This is really the step of allowing the trust with the employee. Now, the next one, stability of personnel. The reason why an organization aims for stability in personnel is because it's efficient and it's about cost. To hire, even recruit, hire, onboard, and train people actually is a pretty costly endeavor. And during that time of onboarding and training, you'll decrease productivity because a person who would normally be operating at a high level is going to have to slow down to train that new person. So remuneration is really just what you pay an employee, and it's important to pay a fair wage. It has some impact on stability of personnel because if you don't pay well enough, people will leave. But in today's society, it's becoming even more of an issue when it comes to a fair wage and the views of the social justice of ensuring that people are paid for their work appropriately and equally. Now, esprit de corps. This one's pretty hard. It's really that team spirit, and it's building this spirit really has a significant impact in so many different areas of your organization. A lot of places talk about having an esprit de corps or they want esprit de corps, but very few talk about how managers can do that. We're going to discuss ways to create this effect throughout the quarter, but there is a major role for managers that would have in this process. Okay, so now we're moving on to behavioral management theory. This is a set of theories and behavioral scientists came up with to better understand human behavior in a work environment, like motivation, conflict management, group dynamics, etc., and how all that improve productivity. There are other theories that are based on behavioral management theory, and we're going to go into that specifically Theory X and Theory Y by McGregor. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. And you also should have seen the video on Theory X and Theory Y in the first week of the quarter. Now, behavioral management theory completely revolves around the behavior of the managers and employees. And it believes that every employee and manager should be given an equal chance to express their views and ideas, and they should be motivated that way at every single step. Now, this theory is significantly tied to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you also saw in the video the first week of the quarter. Now, a really interesting thing happened between 1924 and 1932. It's called the Hawthorne Studies, and it bore out something called the Hawthorne effect. Now, this study was originally designed under scientific management theory, where they wanted to look at lighting levels and how bright an area would be to change worker productivity so that they could get the lighting levels right for workers to perform well. Now, the interesting thing is that regardless of the light level, workers improved their performance. Didn't matter. So they figured that this study at the scientific management theory level was kind of a bust, that there was no difference. When they left, productivity went down. So what it really became was that the results supported the beliefs found in the behavioral management theory, that if workers knew that they or thought that they were being watched, they improved their performance. So this just shows that a manager's interaction with employees does have an effect on the productivity. If you want to learn more about the Hawthorne studies, the link at the bottom of this slide will take you to a YouTube video about that. So I mentioned theory X and theory Y. I'm not really going to belabor this point because you should have seen the video in the first week. There is the link to the video there. It's not comprehensive, but you need to understand this. So think about these policies that might be in place that don't show trust in the employee. There's no initiative. If you remember back to those 14 principles, that would fall more in the theory X, where theory Y um, would allow for greater trust in the employees and beliefs that they would be able to make appropriate decisions in alignment with the company's goals. Now, moving on to management science theory, this really takes a quantitative basis towards decision making, where the last one was much more about relationships. This is more about mathematical models used to aid in decision making and problem solving. I mean, this theory holds that managing is a logical and rational process, so it can be expressed in terms of mathematics. It's a modern extension of scientific management theory, which also takes a quantitative approach. But with management science theory, there's subcategories that really address specific areas in an organization. Here are the four subcategories most commonly used in scientific management theory. First is quantitative management. These are those mathematical techniques like modeling and simulation or linear and nonlinear programming to determine the best way to manage an organization, like how much inventory to keep on hand at different times of the year based on the data that has been seen with past sales as well as predictors for the future. Operations management looks at increasing efficiency in cases like determining the best delivery routes for trucks. So, this is about mileage, distance, number of stops that they'd have to make. Are there more stoplights or stop signs that could decrease efficiency? Now, process improvement, the third subcategory, that's almost grown into a science all into itself. And we're going to talk about quality process improvement in a later class in the quarter. Now it's process focused and makes the repeatable and auditable processes in a way that can make an organization more efficient. Some of these disciplines are management by objective or the continuous process improvement, etc. Like I said, we're going to look at these things in the future in another lecture. Now, finally, management information systems. It's really focused solely on information technology, both hardware and software, in a way to create more effective and efficient access to information to let decision makers, those leaders and managers, make decisions with confidence. So it's not about the computers themselves, it's about aligning computers and software in a way to get the information to managers and leaders so that they can make a decision. Now, chaos theory in business is really a subset of the general chaos theory. As chaotic and random as the world events seem today, there seems as chaotic as chaos is in organizations too. For decades, managers have acted on the basis that organizational events could be controlled. Right? That's what managers are about. They're about controlling the process or building the process. Many chaos theorists and some systems theorists refer to biological systems when they explain this theory that um, that events really are rarely ever controlled, that they are random and unpredictable, and that's same way in business. Now, um, they suggest systems go to more complexity, and as they do, the systems become more volatile or susceptible to events that may be catastrophic, and they have to expend more energy to maintain that complexity. We see this as organizations grow, their numbers grow of employees, so then their systems get more complex and their rules get more in more into more involved to manage the numbers of people that they have. So the theory here is that this trend of complexity will continue until the system splits or combines with another complex system or falls apart entirely. So we might kind of see this the way things work in life or the way that they go to in the world in general. But this complexity of growth either leads to more and more complexity with higher costs, or that complexity growth, if it really goes unchecked, can lead to the organization's demise. Okay, here we are at our last the last theory, organizational environment theory. Now, this theory shifts from looking at how managers affect their organization's working environment and really flips it to looking outside to how the organization works with its external environment. It focuses on the areas outside of a manager's control, but affect their ability to get and use resources. For instance, how does the organization interact with the customer? How does the pool of skilled labor affect its ability to recruit workers? This theory considers relationships inside and outside the organization and states the environment consists of forces, conditions, and influences outside the organization. It really looks at what is the impact of different stages. You have input, so you want to acquire external resources. If you need input, you need to go outside of your organization to get those raw materials. Then conversion. You take those inputs and you process them into goods and services. And then outputs, those finished goods are released into the environment. So there's a whole lot of complexity and dynamism that can happen in this, that some of it the managers can control and some of it they can't. This is a picture of a model that you can consider with this theory. So you notice all these individual boxes, right? For each organization, the model demands managers consider and act upon each and every element of the model. And you have to remember that as you engage with one element, that engagement can have an effect on another element that you didn't even actively engage with. So you can see how this could become pretty complex. All right, there's been a lot of information packed into this lecture, and each of these theories has different and sometimes related views on how to effectively and efficiently manage an organization. Depending on the industry you're in, there may be times to apply multiple theories in the same organization, and sometimes even at the same time. So we've got the scientific management theory, measuring the best way to do things, administrative management theory with those 14 principles. That's really looking at the overall organization. Behavioral management theory, it's that interaction between the employees and the managers and that relationship piece. Management science theory, that extension from scientific management theory, applying mathematical models. And then the organizational environment theory, instead of looking inside of the organization, it's the relationship of the organization with the environment that it can't control. So, as always, if you have any questions regarding this lecture or any other material in class, you can contact me via email or post a question in the question and answer discussion forum in Moodle.